Now that we are coming to the end of winter and we are beginning our forward progress into spring, even though it's still a little ways away, we've been on the death card for quite some time. Now it's time to enter the Hanged Man. And keep in mind that when we do this tarot series, we try to talk about, study, and I guess teach the tarot from the original creators of the cards themselves. So we always start with Robert Wang, then we get into Crowley's deck, and usually I'll use Lon Milo Duquette's interpretation of those things, and then we end with Paul Foster Case, which is my favorite tarot teachings. So, the Hanged Man represents the 23rd path of Mem, or the 12th key in the tarot. The path color is deep blue. The related sound is G sharp, and it means water. The maternal letter is water, or Mem. The esoteric title is the Spirit of the Mighty Waters, and on the 32 paths of wisdom, the 23rd path is called the Stable of Intelligence, and it is so called because it has the virtue of consistency among all numerations. Doesn't that sound wonderful? The Hanged Man, the path of Mem, connects Hod and Geburah on the pillar of severity. So here's the tree of life. We got Hod here and Geburah. So the path lies in between these two on the pillar of severity, which is on the negative pillar. I guess you could say the female pillar, the negative pillar, the passive pillar. It is also a connecting channel between the personality and the higher self. Although its initiatory implications are very difficult from those three paths leading directly into Tiferet. This path and the symbolism of the card is a complete departure from anything previously encountered. This is a curious imagery, and most people react to it by turning the figure right side up. I've done that before. Myself, I turn the figure right side up and say, oh, it's upside down. Whoops. The 18th century writer Court de Gebelin even thought the hanging figure to be a mistake, claiming that the man was originally a symbol of prudence, standing on one foot while deciding where to put the other. And though such an interpretation may seem comical today, it's actually only in the past few decades that the true and complex meaning of this tarot key has been publicly revealed. Now let's look at Waite's card specifically. This is the one that we all kind of know, or the traditional card. Arthur Edward Waite being one of the original members of the Golden Dawn. But Arthur Edward Waite avoided the issue as well as any other knowing writer of his day. He said, quote, "It is a card of profound significance, but all the significance is veiled. I will say very simply, on my own part, that it expresses the relation and one of its aspects between the divine and the universe." End quote. Perhaps the best clue offered by Waite is that the figure is intended to represent a fly-fought cross or swastika and is thus related to Kether in some very essential way. And if you studied or watched the initiation videos, I guess the videos on the Sephirah that I did, you can see it, the swastika kind of there with the legs and kind of what it represents. I don't have the lines to draw it very good. I guess I could make a little swastika, but knowing you guys have to know that symbol, right, didn't come from the Nazis. It actually started a long, long time ago. And so that's why that symbol is also represented in Kether, the whirling. Look at that. I'm making an ugly swastika up here, like the whirling universe, kind of. Right? So don't go thinking weird thoughts just because you see a symbol. Study it. Actually know where it comes from. So anyways, the best clue offered by Waite is that the figure is intended to represent a fly-fought cross, or swastika. And there's the Waite card again. and is thus related to Kether in some very essential way. Most important is that this is the path of water, the letter Mem being one of the three maternals, and in some respects, this is a path of baptism into maternal water. In fact, it could be stated that the experience of each maternal path is a baptism. Remember, I talked about this in the first videos of studying the Tree of Life. Shin is the baptism of fire. Here, let me just pull up the tree and I'll show you this, right? So Shin, or the judgment card, right here. Actually, let me do the arrows. So Shin resides here. That's the baptism of fire. This is the baptism of water. And then the Fool card is the baptism of air. Those are called the transitional elements in the tree, right? In fact, it could be stated that the experience of each maternal path is a baptism. Shin is the baptism of fire, or the judgment card. Mem is the baptism of water, or the hanged man. And Aleph is the baptism of the air, or the Fool. The water baptism is the central and pivotal experience of the entire Tree of Life. Water means consciousness, the first principle of the alchemists. Remember that. This substance, sometimes called the thinking principle, is symbolized by water because it has some of the qualities of physical water, particularly in its wave movement. In its lowest expression, it is the astral fluid first discovered on the path of the universe, drawn from Yesod, the foundation. And this helps to explain the particularly cryptic description of Mem from the 32 Paths of Wisdom. Quote, "The 23rd path is called the stable intelligence, and it is so called because it has the virtue of consistency among all numerations," end quote. That is to say, that the intelligence operates in every sphere, in every path, and in every Sephiroth. It operates everywhere on the tree and everywhere in life. In the same way, the astral fluid, the water, underlies everything that is. One can describe the qualities and activities of this water, but it is not until the 23rd path that one is actually absorbed into it, or is, quote, drowned in these waters, and perceives himself as an intrinsic and inseparable part of the one consciousness. We are today living in a period when much of the complicated and remote symbolism of the past is being expressed in very comprehensible psychological terms. In discussing an experience of the collective unconscious, Carl Jung quite literally describes the experience of the hanged man. He speaks of it like this, quote, "A boundless expanse full of unprecedented uncertainty, with apparently no inside and no outside, no above and no below, no here and no there, no mine, no thine, no good and no bad. It is the world of water, like Bruce Lee says, where all life floats in suspension, where the realm of the sympathetic system, the soul of everything living begins, where I am individually this and that, where I experience the other in myself, and the other than myself experiences me. The collective unconscious is anything but an encapsulated personal system. It is sheer objectivity, as wide as the world and open to all the world. There I am, the object of every subject, incomplete reversal of my ordinary consciousness, where I am always the subject that has an object." Pretty cool, right? That's pretty rad. Almost 400 years in his Dark Night of the Soul, St. John of the Cross recorded his own experience of the hanged man, though in Christian terms he said this, quote, "With his gentle hand he wounded my neck and caused all my senses to be suspended. I remained lost in oblivion. My face I inclined on the beloved. All ceased and I abandoned myself, leaving my cares forgotten among the lilies," end quote. Now this may be compared with another of Jung's statements. Jung quotes this, "There I am utterly one with the world, so much a part of it that I forgot all too easily who I really am." Lost in oneself is a good way of describing this state. The unconscious no sooner touches us than we are it. We become unconscious of ourselves. Hindu mystics describe this state as samadhi, referring to a condition where the physical processes are literally suspended in trance, while the consciousness affects a union with the divine. This was a state with which Crowley was obsessed. He wrote, quote, "I was absolutely convinced of the supreme importance of devoting my life to obtaining samadhi," end quote. In fact, when he came to believe that the so-called secret chiefs of the Order of the Golden Dawn had chosen him to succeed Mathers, he wrote this, quote, "I made it a condition that I should obtain or attain samadhi, that is, that I should receive a degree of illumination, in default of which it would be presumptuous of me to put myself forward," end quote. Crowley also makes it clear that samadhi, which he defines with unusual simplicity as union with the Lord, is a general term for a number of states involving different degrees of trance. In his book, or in his Confessions, he describes a devastating experience of the highest form of samadhi on the path of the fool. From the standpoint of tarot, what is important is the path of the hanged man is only the first entry into a sequence of states of union. Now, while this experience may be one which we spend our lives seeking, it is only one step along the great way. In this regard, Crowley again offers excellent instruction. Writing of Alan Bennett's increasing desire to become a Buddhist monk, he says this, quote, "The phenomena of dhyana and samadhi had ceased to exercise their first fascination. It seemed to him that they were insidious obstacles to true spiritual progress, and that their occurrence, in reality, broke up the control of the mind, which he was trying to establish, and prevented him from reaching the ultimate truth which he sought. He had the strength of mind to resist the appeal of even these intense spiritual joys. But like physical love, they persuade their dupe to put up with the essential evil of existence." End quote. Think about that for a minute. Like physical love, they persuade their dupe, D-U-P-E, the duped one, to put up with the essential evil of existence. Now, the idea is that we must move constantly upward on the tree of life. It's not until one has experienced the next higher Sephirah that the qualities of the lower Sephirah are completely understood and can be directed. Here we see that the path of men leads directly to Geburah above Tiferet. Geburah is the active part of the higher self. So let's pull up the tree of life here. We know where Geburah is right here. This is the active part of the higher self, action. And here's the higher self on this. Let me get a circle, right? So we know the higher self lies right here. So this is the active. Actually, the whole of the Ruach lies right there where that hexagram is inside there. But the active part of the higher self is right here. Yeah. It is the active part of the higher self. It is the fiery energy on the pillar of water below Bina. It is that on which the feet of the hanged man rest. The key symbol here is the cross above the triangle, which is also the emblem of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, indicating that the principle of the hanged man represents the essence of the order's teaching. The cross above the triangle, you can see that in all three cards, in a sense, can't you? It really shows it in Case's card. Well, Wang's card. What was I thinking? He even draws a triangle there in that one. So you have the cross above the triangle. And if you see this tree is in the shape of what? The holy letter Mem, this whole tree that he's hanging from in this card. Now, so that is actually the symbol of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, indicating that the principles of the hanged man represent the essence of the order's teaching. Moreover, this card represents a summation of the teaching of the entire tarot. The allegorical book T, found in the hands of Christian Rosenkreutz when his tomb was opened, containing the most secret teachings, handed down through the ages. It is not uncommon, as in the weight card, for the figure to be hanged from a Tav cross. In fact, the symbolic relationship between Tav and Mem is profound. That is at the very center of the cube of space and is crossed by the lines of the Fool, Aleph, Judgment, Shin, and the Hanged Man, Mem. But Mem final, the final form of the letter Mem, the completely closed form of this letter used when it occurs at the end of a word, is also attributed to this exact center point. The symbolism pretty much says, in essence, that the completion of Mem is Tav. Both Mem and Tav are suspended at the center of the cube of space. The reversed figure on the card represents the suspension of personal consciousness, where a greater reality imposes a complete reversal of perspective. This has been described as the human spirit suspended by a single thread. Yet this is a willing suspension. It's not a victim situation. You put yourself there. A sacrifice, which is a baptism, but which is also a crucifixion. This, then, is a card of the dying God. Now, one might well ask why this crucifixion should be on one side of the tree, and the reason that this is an essentially intellectual experience. That's why. As is implied by the position of the legs of the hanged man, the cross above the triangle is the 4 above the 3, the imaginative qualities of the empress subordinate to the rational qualities of the emperor. This is the ultimate sacrifice of desire to a rational principle. A balance to this experience is to be found in the Wheel of Fortune directly opposite the hanged man on the Tree of Life. So when you look at the Tree of Life, you'll have the hanged man here, right? The Wheel of Fortune will be there. This is the active pillar. This is the passive pillar. I'm just going to telling you that so you can think about what he's about to say next. So there's the hanged man. I have to switch back and forth, so I lose my spot sometimes, you know. So Tav is the very center of the cube of space. We talked about that. The reversal figure on the card represents the suspension of personal consciousness. This is where a greater reality imposes a complete reversal of perspective. So this is why the crucifixion should be on that side of the tree, on the pillar of severity, or the passive side. So the reason is that this is essentially intellectual experience. The cross above the triangle is the 4 above the 3. Think about that. The imaginative qualities of the empress, subordinate to the rational qualities of the emperor. This is the ultimate sacrifice of desire to a rational principle. So a balance to this would be the Wheel of Fortune directly opposite on the Pillar of Mercy, the Hanged Man on the Tree of Life, and the Wheel of Fortune are directly opposite of each other. The Hanged Man is rest, and the Wheel of Fortune is activity. Expressed in another way, the Hanged Man is what happens when the wheel stops turning. The suspension or crucifixion in space is the willful arrest of the Wheel of Fortune, so to speak. On the other hand, the Wheel of Fortune is the activation of which is inactive on the path of the Hanged Man. As is written on the Emerald Tablet, this is multiplicity and unity, the activity and passivity of the one thing. It has hopefully been demonstrated that the path of the Hanged Man must be approached very differently from the lower paths on the tree. There is a reversal of conceptual framework, which is at once a willful suspension and a refinement of observation. The mediator becomes the object of his own meditation. He becomes the other, which had been the object of pursuit. The other becomes him. One of the primary qualities of this path is that it is a path of eternally unresolved possibilities. Its openness without beginning or end, the exact opposite of the Wheel of Fortune, which encloses in eternal motion. When the Mem is closed, it becomes Tav. Tav is Mem reversed. The Hanged Man is the universe reversed. This is the tarot secret of the dying God on the path of water. This mythology of the dying god is very universal, and every culture seems to have some form of it, whether that be Christ, Osiris, or any local deity. The hanged man is one rather peculiar aspect of this cross-cultural myth. In Norse mythology, the god Odin sacrificially hanged himself from the branches of the world tree. In Greece, the goddess Artemis was annually hanged in an effigy at her sacred grove in the Arcadian hills, and that was known as the Hanged One. Any number of such ritual hangings could be cited, none of which is a final death. These are merely reversals where the feet of the god are planted in the anima mundi and not on the earth. The death and resurrection of any god relates to this path here, and is described as a Kabiric death. Kabiric, K-A-B-I-R-I-C, just in case I'm saying it wrong. In the myth of the Kabiri, one brother is slain by the other three. His dismembered body is discovered and is, with great joy, resurrected for the god. He's resurrected for the good of humanity. The parallels with the Osiris legend is pretty clear here. In that story, the body parts of Osiris are scattered about the land and collected and resurrected. The death of the god is a natural continuing event and is symbolized by the ritual formula of EAO, or E-A-O, meaning Isis, Apophis, Osiris, symbolizing fruition, death, and then resurrection. Isis, fruition, death, Apophis, resurrection, Osiris. This formula also relates to that of, guess what? Yod, He, Vav. And you have the final He of manifestation, which is what? Earth. So as usual, Crowley's version of the card is more complicated than that of either Mather's or Waite, and his figure, which emphasizes the cross and triangle, is suspended from the Egyptian Ankh, a form of the Thoth, and behind it are the elemental tablets, summoning up all of nature. His left foot hangs from a coiled serpent, which is the creator and destroyer who operates all change. The lower serpent represents the effect of the work of God. So let's get into Crowley's card. There's going to be, when you go through these creators and their cards, always a slight, here, let me erase this real quick, a slight different interpretation from each person. Although Crowley's cards are definitely more, in my opinion, detailed, colorful, and artistic. And Lady Harris did a good job on them. All right. Let's get into Crowley's card here a little. The lower serpent represents the effect of the work of God. Through his work, a child is begotten, as shown by the serpent stirring in the darkness of the abyss below him. So, that was Robert Wang's interpretation of the Hanged Man. And if you want to see Robert Wang's Hangman, you notice how he talks about the Hanged Man every other card, but he doesn't talk about his card. This is his card here. Pretty simple. The symbolism is very obvious too. All right, Crowley's card, the Hanged Man. Now, the Hanged Man, according to Lon Milo Duquette, means the spirit of the mighty waters, the elemental trump of water. The original design is the figure of a hanged or crucified man from a gallows shaped like the letter Dalet, hangs by one foot a young fair man. His other leg forms a cross with a suspending one. His arms clasped behind his head form an upright triangle, and this radiates light. His mouth is resolutely closed. Now, the Hebrew letter Mem once again stands for water. It's one of the mother letters of the Hebrew alphabet. This, again, is the tree of life, path 23, joining Geburah severity to Hod splendor. Now, when you look at the four trees, though, in the four worlds, the colored trees, this is the colors that you get from them. The energies of these colors, you have deep blue, sea green, deep olive green, and white flecked purple. Here's a little quote in the book, though. You guys got to get these books. I'll leave the links in all of these videos. Get these books and study them so you can understand like this whole wonderful story of the tarot through these three authors. Are the best, if you ask me. Crowley's card. Let's get that back up there. There we go. Let not the water whereon thou journeyest let not the water whereon thou journeyest wet thee, and being come to shore, plant thou the vine, and rejoice without shame. From a letter found from Lady Harris to Crowley of the fall in 1939, a little quote says, "We will finish like Alice through the looking glass by having the whole pack on our heads. Good night." Can you imagine like a guy and a girl like Crowley and Harris making these cards? And nowadays, like if we were to get together and talk about making a pack of tarot cards, we'd just get on Discord or Zoom or whatever. Back then, though, they wrote letters to each other. So isn't that cool? She's doing the art for all the cards, right? And Crowley's probably off somewhere else, and they're writing letters back and forth. Here's another one from Crowley back to Harris, December the 19th, 1939. He says, "I have long foreseen the Alice in Wonderland conclusion of our labors, but that, if you remember, was the signal for the awakening to the beauty of life." Here's what Lon says. "To paraphrase what I said concerning the Hierophant, a 2:12 is not your Aeon of Osiris hanged man, neither is it the hanged man of the Aeon of Isis." Crowley makes a tremendous attempt to explain why this is so in the Book of Thoth. "Please don't misunderstand me. I mean no disrespect," Lon says, "when I use the words attempt to explain, and I am certainly not suggesting that I could explain these things any better. It's just very clear to me that before Crowley sat down to write his commentary on this card, he must have swallowed a handful of, I think I will try to explain the innermost secret of life and all the mysteries of high magic in the universe in general, pills." He gives it a pretty good try. He even offers us several very revealing paragraphs concerning the most profound secrets of sexual alchemy and magic, that for those who are interested in those subjects will certainly be worth further study and meditation. And you need this book and read chapter 11 of this book, Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot. Perhaps the reason he apparently goes so far afield in his comments is that he believed that the hangman, as historically and traditionally understood, is now obsolete in the new Aeon tarot deck. Of course, Crowley would say that. The hanged man is look, I can hear Crowley right now. It just represents the old dying gods. It doesn't mean anything. It shouldn't even be in there. In fact, he tells us to regard it as an evil legacy from the old Aeon, and goes on to compare it rather unflatteringly with the appendix and the human body. This is what he says. "This card is beautiful in a strange, immemorial, moribund manner. It is the card of the dying god. Its importance in the present pack is merely that of the cenotaph." Now, a cenotaph is a tomb or a monument erected to honor a person whose actual body is buried somewhere else. Be that as it may, he goes on to give us a very good Aeon of Horus interpretation of the hanged man, the highlights of which, even though I guess Lon says I don't have any of those, I think I will try to explain the innermost secret of life and all the mysteries of high magic in the universe in general, pills. So Lon's not taking those pills. But I will try to summarize. First, observe that the arms and legs of our crucified hero make the figure of a cross surmounting a triangle. Crowley tells us that this symbolizes the descent of the light into the darkness in order to redeem it. It is nothing less than the cosmic sacrifice that creates, sustains, and destroys the universe. Isis, Apophis, Osiris. There's just no resurrection in that one. That would be Osiris, but let's just say sustains the universe is the resurrection. Our perception of how we are part of this grand sacrifice has evolved over the aeons. This sacrifice meant one thing to our ancestors in the Aeon of Isis, another thing in the Aeon of Osiris, and now, as we shall see, means something altogether different in the present Aeon of Horus. Remember that Thelemites believe that we are in currently the Aeon of Horus. If for some reason you have not read chapter 6 of this book, I suggest that you do so before reading on. Well, folks, we're going to read on anyways, but it is a good idea to read chapter 6 of Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot by Lon Duquette. Crowley identifies the Aeon of Isis with the element water. This was an age when it was universally perceived that human life came from woman alone. God knows Crowley loved the woman. The sacrifice was made by the woman on the altar of her own body, and the hanged man was the unborn baby who floated upside down in the water of the womb just prior to birth. The Aeon of Horus is identified with the element air. Remember, that's the Fool card, or Aleph, which is sympathetic to both water and fire. Therefore, in the Aeon of Osiris, the sacrifice was one of compromise. This was, according to Crowley, the age of the dying god, when a guy just couldn't be a real savior unless he first came out of the water baptized, and then compromised his own body by allowing himself to be tortured, murdered, and then hung or nailed to a tree to redeem the lives of his people. I can hear that System of a Down song now. Self-righteous suicide. I'd play it, but I'd get flagged. A couple of thousand years ago, this selfless gesture was a big step forward in spiritual politeness. As a matter of fact, for the Aeon of Osiris, it became the supreme formula of adeptship, expressed by I-N-R-I, or E-I-O. The Aeon of Horus is identified with the element of fire, or the Judgment card in other decks, represented by the Hebrew mother letter Shin and the Aeon trump in Crowley's deck. And the Aeon of Horus, the water of the hanged man and the fire of the Aeon don't get along at all. And this Aeon, Crowley warns, the whole idea of sacrifice is a misconception of nature. The gesture of sacrificial suicide is not only obsolete, it is downright counterproductive. But now, under a fiery lord of the Aeon, the watery element, so far as water is below the abyss, is definitely hostile unless the opposition is the right opposition implied in marriage. Now, the marriage that he is talking about is the annihilation of self in the beloved. This is symbolized in the card by the Ankh, or the union of the rose and cross of the male and female. It is the devotional ecstasy that dissolves all sense of separateness that Lon wrote about in chapter 11 of this book. This marriage, as mystics and saints of every age and culture have tried to tell us, is the supreme sacrifice. The hanged man of the Thoth tarot still symbolizes the descent of the light into the darkness in order to redeem it, but the word redeem no longer implies an existing debt that needs to be paid. Instead, redemption in the Aeon of Horus, according to the Thelemites, is the noble duty of the enlightened to bring enlightenment to the unenlightened. How ironic. We were just talking about that on the live show. What does enlightenment mean? And who are we to say who is and who isn't enlightenment? However, right here in this book it says, the noble duty of the enlightened is to bring enlightenment to the unenlightened. Please note how Lady Harris ingeniously uses projective geometry to link this card with other water-related cards. Try placing the Hanged Man top to top with the High Priestess and the Queen of Cups. Other items of interest include her stylized Enochian tablet in the background and her use of the color green to inject a beautiful Venusian influence. Cool. All right. So there's the Crowley card. Again, get these books. I mean, we're just kind of covering the basics here, the secrets here, but get these books so you can kind of see how it all plays out, how all the cards work together in the mysteries. Because the whole story and the whole truth of the mysteries is in the tarot. I believe that, actually. Okay, so we're going to go to Paul Foster Case's card here. Here's the Case card. So rich in color, isn't it? Kind of pretty. It's beautiful. That's why it's cool to take this correspondence course from the builders of the Adytum if you want to learn tarot, and you can get a blank deck of cards that you can color yourself. So real quick, we'll go over Paul Foster Case's correspondences. They definitely line up with the other artists and creators of the tarot. The hanged man, the Roman numeral 12, the key number 12, the Hebrew letter mem. The value of that letter, though, is 40 or 600. The signification definitely means water. The Kabbalistic intelligence on the tree of life, or the tree of intelligences, the mystery tree, is the stable intelligence. The power aspect of consciousness is the law of reversal or surrender. And astrology corresponds with Neptune. The human faculty is, guess what? Water. The color is blue. The note that it corresponds to, the sound, is G sharp. The path on the tree is Gabora Tehod. Notice how he says Tuhod, Gabora Tuhod, because he's thinking about going up the tree. And the cube of space is east to west, which we might do a whole series on the cube of space, which is another cool way to look at the tarot and how you can see all of its correspondences and the story of the tarot. It's really cool. And in alchemy, obviously, guess what? It corresponds to water. Here we go with Paul Foster Case. The symbolism of key 12 is obviously related to the law of reversal as that of key 11 is to the law of equilibrium. The application of this law finds its expression in the completely reversed outlook of the truly wise from that of the ordinary man. For the person who is truly enlightened, who has truly identified himself with the one identity, everything in his entire experience is reversed. Maybe that's what enlightenment is, right? When everything in your entire experience flips on its head. No longer does he perceive the universe as a warring, separative multiplicity of things and conditions. He sees it instead as a unity, which manifests itself as a succession of harmoniously related parts, none of which stands alone, and all of which are sustained as the expression of that unity in its entirety. No matter where he may be, no matter how things may seem, he is consciously aware that all the power that ever was or will be is here right now. The Hebrew letter mem, pronounced mem, means water or seas. In occultism, it stands for the element of water, and water symbolizes the law of reversal because it reflects everything upside down. More than that, however, the man who has truly made this important reversal of consciousness is alone able to understand what is really meant by the word water in occultism. Others may be able to grasp the idea intellectually, but he knows it firsthand and thus fully comprehends its significance. We already learned in the symbolism of the high priestess to identify water with what? The subconscious. And we also learned in the symbolism that the subconscious is actually the substance that is in every form in the entire universe, that one thing from which all things are made. Consequently, it will be easy to recognize the letter mem as signifying the mother deep, or the roots of nature. This is further carried out by the fact that this letter is one of the three mother letters of the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph and Shin being the other two. They are really representative of the three aspects of the absolute or the all. In this connection, there are many points of a highly metaphysical nature that might be brought out, but it's for students of metaphysics to ponder the obvious implications of this key. This instruction is intended for practical use, so that beyond an occasional hint, we shall abstain from highly metaphysical interpretations of the tarot. We don't want to get too existential about this stuff, intellectual, you know. I mean, we kind of do here, but that's only because it's fun. The universal subconsciousness is also your personal subconscious. Its creative faculties are those which you govern and control through the suggestions given to it by your self-conscious mind. One of the things that makes all forms of mental and occult practice seem so damn difficult is the supposition that what we have to do demands the exertion of an intangible mental power against the inertia of a very tangible physical reality. It seems so difficult. Now this matter, quote matter, which surrounds us seems so dense, so resistant, so hard to move. that most people consider it preposterous even to believe that mere thinking can have any power over it whatsoever. But the occultist is not taken in by any such surface appearances. He sees himself surrounded by things which have neither the solidity nor the inertia that his unaided senses report. He understands that the densest forms of physical substance, as well as the lightest gases, are really just forms of energy built up from infinitesimal, widely separated drops of fluidic water, or that water of the occultists. Thus, when he begins to attack the practice problem of changing conditions by changing his thinking, he does not face the difficulty which besets everyone who believes what his senses report about the things in his environment. He has a deeper understanding of his environment. The practical occultist knows that there is no difference between the energy which takes form as thought and that which takes form is a diamond, a piece of metal, or any other physical object. Furthermore, he knows that thought forms are centers of more intense and more lasting activity than any physical thing. Thus, the occult teaching about water as substance, which is precisely the same in many respects as the modern scientific conception of the electrical constitution of matter, enables the aspirant to effect a reversal in his mental attitudes towards the conditions of his environment. By means of this reversal, he is enabled to free his mind. Lawrence Fishburne in The Matrix? Telling you to free your mind, Leo. So he is enabled to free his mind from that subjection to appearances, which prevents most people from using their thought power to change conditions for the better. For the student of occultism, the number 12 is almost inexhaustible in its meanings. It's like the number 7 in that respect, and it's also related to that number. So 12 is the product of 3 and 4, the Empress and the Emperor, while 7 is their sum. We're already familiar with 12 and 7 as representing the number of signs of the zodiac and the number of planets, respectively, in traditional astrology. But 12 is associated with the idea of completeness because there are 12 months in the year, 12 signs in the zodiac, and etc. And since 12 is composed of the digits 1 and 2, and we read digits from right to left, I guess in Hebrew, 12 expresses the idea of the manifestation of 2 through the agency of 1. In the tarot, 2 is the high priestess and 1 is the magician. So that this reading suggests the outpouring of the powers of the subconsciousness through the fixation of attention. Remember, I told you that the higher cards always have the lower cards inside their story. We'll get into that later once we wrap up all these different arcana cards before we get into the lower cards. So this is precisely what the Hanged Man typifies. When concentration is prolonged, the effect produced is what the Hindus called, again, samadhi, or the superconscious state of existence. It is the perfect union of the personal consciousness with the universal, attained by practices which quiet the mind and suspend the formation of association of ideas. This is why meditation and focus, the practice of it, is so important. The title, The Hanged Man, clearly refers to the result of these practices. Without changing its meaning, we might just as well call it the suspended man. The Hindu word for mind is manas, and our English word man actually is derived from that same root. Thus, mind and man are essentially closely related ideas, so that this title immediately suggests to the initiated the idea of the suspended mind, or the suspension of personal activity. Now, this suspension is achieved by concentration. Sorry, I kind of went off. I sort of zoned out there. This suspension is achieved by concentration. And when concentration is prolonged, samadhi is attained. And with it, the release of those marvelous powers of your subconscious, which give the adept perfect control over his mind, his body, and the conditions of his environment. So, A lot of people will talk about this from a practical point. They'll say, well, you can't just think things into existence and manifest things with your mind. It doesn't work that way. But remember that all is mind. Everything starts and actually finishes in the great mind. You have to look at this as like a very deep reality, a very, very deep and dense illusion. It doesn't mean sit there and don't do anything. In fact, it means quite the opposite. But to be able to suspend the mind and really focus on something is something that really, really needs to be understood here. As a result of even momentary experiences of the superconscious state, one's whole attitude towards life is changed. The person who's had his experience feels himself to be merely a vehicle or an instrument of the cosmic life breath. Gone forever is the delusion that the personality is or can be ever separate from the sum total of the universal activity. In the words of Jesus, he said himself, quote, "Of myself I can do nothing." Now this expresses the state of mind reached by all who have this experience, yet this is not in any sense a confession of weakness. It is simply the recognition that there is not the least personal activity which is not the expression of universal forces and laws. Instead of lessening the importance of personality, this consciousness tremendously increases it, for it shows that the real value of individual personality lies in the fact that it can act as the agency whereby limitless powers of the one life may be brought down into manifestation in the conditions of relative existence. I really want to say that again, because I think, in my opinion, this right here is the most important lesson of the card itself. Okay. So remember, let's say this again. This is not in any sense a confession of weakness. It is simply the recognition that there is not the least personal activity, which is not the expression of universal forces and laws. Instead of lessening the importance of the individual personality, this consciousness tremendously increases it. For the real value of personality lies in the fact that it can act as an agency whereby the limitless powers of the one may be brought down into manifestation in the conditions of relative existence. That's you. The planet Neptune is the astrological attribution of this key, or key 12. This planet, although not discovered by exoteric astronomers when these keys were invented, given we know that, but was nevertheless known about by occultists, so that we consequently find a place for it in the tarot series. Now, one has only to know that astrologers assign the quality of inversion to Neptune to connect it immediately with this key. Neptune is said to be the ruler of inspiration, psychometry, and mediumship. It is also connected with the gases and drugs that produce unconsciousness, but it's an established fact that many of these drugs and gases produce a bodily change that make possible for a short time an imperfect perception of higher forms of consciousness. Be on your guard here, Paul Foster Case says. You may have read of the many cases on record in which a narcotic drug or gas has opened temporarily the gateway of the higher consciousness. So whether you're doing psychedelic drugs or it's the oracles, right? I forget their names right off the top of my head. Yeah, we've read about all that stuff. Has opened temporarily gateways to higher consciousness. You know, Paul Foster Case is going to warn us against all this, right? But he says, never experiment with such dangerous things. No intelligent occultist ever used drugs for that purpose. The reason is that although such chemical substances, when introduced into the blood, do bring about the action of the brain centers through which higher consciousness may be expressed, the active principle in them that produces this result cannot be separated by any process known to modern chemistry from certain other substances which are dangerous. So basically what he's saying here is, talking about the oracles of Delphi and all that stuff. But what he's saying here in short is, yeah, there's chemicals that, can open up brain centers so you can see these realms of consciousness or whatever. But when you have to take drugs, those chemicals are attached to other dangerous chemicals that your body don't like. Now, I don't know if that's the case now with like DMT and certain forms of mushrooms, and that's a whole other discussion. But back then when he wrote this, yeah, probably. Like, I think, well, who knows? That's a whole other discussion. Yeah. I'm getting ADD. I want to go into it, but it's irrelevant from the actual teaching of this card. So it's something we could talk about later. So yet the fact that narcotic drugs can sometimes enable one to experience a measure of superconsciousness points to one conclusion, though. He who experiences the divine consciousness does so because of a chemical change in the composition of his blood. Ooh. Now we're getting into the deeper stuff, alchemy, etc. He who experiences the divine consciousness does so because of a chemical change in the composition of his blood. But this change must be effected from within the bodily organism and not from outside agencies. Now, since the bodily processes are completely under the control of the subconscious, it follows that the alteration of bodily states is also affected by the subconscious. The necessary chemical change in your organism is most properly brought about by the kind of work you're doing now. When you look at these tarot keys and carry out the other directions given in these pages, you give subconsciousness certain definite patterns upon which to work. The response to these patterns brings about the modifications in your body chemistry in that perfectly normal and safe way. Think about what I'm saying here. The ultimate result is that you will experience the kind of consciousness represented by the Hanged Man, or Key 12. The gallows is in the shape of the letter Tav, attributed to Key 21. Each upright line of the letter is a tree trunk having 6 sloped branches. These stand for the power symbolized by the 12 simple letters of the Hebrew alphabet and the 12 signs of the zodiac. The parts of the body also that are governed by those 12 signs of the zodiac. Thus the gallows, as the letter Ta refers to the universe as a rhythmic dance of life. That's what that means. From this, the Hanged Man is suspended as an intimation that superconsciousness brings a vivid realization that human personality is dependent upon and adequately supported by the totality of cosmic forces. I'll say that again, too, because that's some really deep stuff there. It just doesn't seem like it is at first. The Hanged Man, this card, is an intimation that superconsciousness brings a vivid realization that human personality is dependent upon and adequately supported by the totality of cosmic forces. It's a hell of an illusion. Life. But it's not really an illusion. The legs of the Hanged Man form an inverted figure 4, which here refers to reason. They are dressed in red to indicate the fact, often overlooked by Tyros in practical occultism, that what appears to be inaction in states of intense concentration is really tremendous activity. The mind in the state of samadhi is still, just as a spinning top is still, because it is moving with great rapidity and an unbroken flow of knowledge around a single point of consciousness. The arms and head of the Hanged Man suggest that the points of a triangle, so that the whole figure represents a 4 by the legs and 3 by the arms and head, with 3 beneath 4. Now 3 and 4 are the factors of 12, and in tarot 3 is the Empress and 4 is the Emperor. Hence, this arrangement shows the subordination of imagination to reason. This is exactly the mental result of applying the law of reversal. Most people permit reason to be dominant by imagination, or to be dominated by imagination. So a few have discovered that reason can determine what mental images shall occupy the field of attention. These few imagine creatively, and their imagery is governed by their mental vision of the place of human personality in the cosmic order. Most people simply rationalize their uncontrolled imaginations, which are at the mercy of race thought and casual suggestion. Now, if you look at the card, the jacket is blue, or supposed to be, depending on who colored it, which is the color attributed of water. The lunar crescents in the skirt represent the forces of the subconscious mind, or the subconsciousness. The belt and trimming of the jacket suggest the combination of the circle and cross in the form of the symbol of Mars, again relating to the fact that what is apparently absolute motionless suspension of activity is really a form of intense expression of force. The halo around the head is a suggestion that he is an embodiment of the one light, and to carry out this suggestion, the hair is white, so that it's like that of the emperor and the hermit. Below his head, the ground is hollowed out as though by a watercourse, but all of that part of his head, from the eyes to the top of the skull, is actually below the surface of the soil from which trees spring. Thus, we are shown that his vision and his brain functions are active below the surface. This indeed is what differentiates an adept from most people. He sees through the surface of things and discerns the hidden laws below the elusive appearances upon which most people base all their judgments and their actions. I think Manly P. Hall said that too. For an occultist, they see doubly so through things, deeper into the laws of nature. So Paul Foster Case says this week, and depending on how long we stay on this card, use as an exercise the practice of checking your thoughts to see how many times the reversal of your first is more nearly in line with the teachings of ageless wisdom than the thought itself. In other words, if you have an impulsive thought, take note of it, focus on it, and then reverse it and see if the reversal isn't more true or in line with ageless wisdom than the actual impulsive thought itself. Check yourself for rationalizations. One of the most common forms of this habit is the rationalizing of your desire, so that it appears to be in line with reason when it's entirely opposed to reason in reality. And you can hear this spoke about by addicts, especially when they're addicted or they want something, and it's totally unreasonable for them to take the substance, but they reason in their mind why they should. We do this all the time with things that we desire. We wrap it around reason so that it convinces us to do it. One of the most common forms of this pernicious habit is the rationalizing of a desire so that it appears to be in line with reason when it's actually opposed to reason in reality. An overworked example in these days of easy credit and future payments is the desire for something that reason says you can't afford. This is why we take payments. He's really like taking this down to super practical earthly stuff here, which I think is cool. So one, as often as not, proceeds to rationalize himself into the belief that he cannot do without the object of his desire, and then he thinks that he has compiled the new dictates of reason. He has simply placed imagination above reason and deluded himself. But there are many other forms of rationalization. Keep your eyes open for them. I remember we used to say to people, like when we sold cars to people, you know, a car salesman's job is to get someone down to monthly payment. That's their job. As long as they get you to focus on monthly payment, they can move numbers around. And then the person will say, well, I'm making a payment of this. I can't afford $50 more a month. Well, one, you probably should. Reason says you shouldn't be buying things on credit if you really want to have wealth to begin with, unless it's an investment like a house maybe or something. But we would do that thinking that he's talking about for them. We would reason into the imagination of their desire by saying, well, that's just one Starbucks coffee a day that you could do without so that you can have this car. Isn't that worth it? And they would be like, yeah. You know, I drink too much caffeine anyways, and whatever. And, you know, we'd say all kinds of things. So what he's saying is focus on this one little teaching and about flipping reason and imagination and see how they work and flip them back and forth in your consciousness just to see the base of the teaching of this card. Even though this card has many deeper teachings, both biologically, cosmically, consciously, there's many teachings in this card. But as an exercise, you can really see this kind of reversal flip of reason and imagination in all of us and the way we behave and the decisions that we make. So naturally, when you do divination, it's something that I don't really talk about, that I might start talking about with each of these cards. But I mean, you can look this up. But when people are doing divination for this card, and let me go back to this here. They're not really, no one's really concerned with the deeper, like, esoteric teaching. So, you know, if the card comes out upright, usually people means, oh, you're taking a pause, or you're surrendering, or you're letting go. New perspectives, that kind of thing. If it comes out in reversed, some people will say, oh, that means a delay or resistance or stalling or indecision. But if you go to this website called Biddy Tarot, they say the hangman shows a man suspended from a T-shaped cross made of living wood. He is hanging upside down, viewing the world from a completely different perspective, and his facial expression is calm and serene, suggesting that he is in this hanging position by his own choice. He has a halo around his head, symbolizing new insight, awareness, and enlightenment. His right foot is bound to the tree, but his left foot remains free, bent at the knee and tucked in behind his right leg. His arms are bent with his hands behind his back, forming an inverted triangle. The man is wearing red pants, representing human passion and the physical body, and a blue vest for knowledge. See how people interpret things different? Blue means water to Paul Foster Case, but Biddy Tarot means knowledge, which water in occultism really means consciousness, so it's not that far off. The Hanged Man is the card of ultimate surrender, of being suspended in time and of martyrdom and sacrifice to the greater good. So now, hopefully you guys see the deeper meanings of this card. Also remember, too, what it corresponds with, not just practically and reasonably, but also in, like, alchemy, the Hebrew letters, all of that stuff, astrology, the baptism that it corresponds to, and the transitional elements on the tree. And even read, if you really want to, read about the baptism and the crucifixion of Christ. It's all there. It's all in here. All right, until we get to the next card, thanks for watching. Thanks for studying this stuff with me. And I hope you learned something by listening to this video.